All right, welcome back everyone to this podcast with Red Quill Media. Once again, we are coming to you live from the Last Chance Stampede. This is our out in the field podcast setup. We've got the whole set that you see, this beautiful table and some of the decor in the back was all provided by New Vision Thrift Store. So a huge thank you to them for sponsoring us and coming to set this all up. Now I'm really excited to introduce the next guest we have on the podcast. This is my good friend Sharon. So why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
I am the chair of Pro-Life Montana. I'm also a retired licensed counselor. So I literally just came from, now I just volunteer at my church. So I just came from seeing a few clients this morning. And now I get to do what I really like to do, counsel and help people without having to deal with the insurance stuff. I don't have to do that anymore if I'm just a volunteer at the church.
Yeah.
But as chair of Pro-Life Montana, we've just recently launched a billboard campaign to alert women who have been harmed by abortion to the fact that they may have legal options for compensation and help if they were harmed by an abortion. And we know Pro-Life Montana requested a year of Medicaid claims, 2023, fall of 2023 to 2024, to see, okay, to see what was happening within Montana with harms. And so we were able to find out that six hospitals in Montana had claims that were coded complications of abortion. And we know that women are often told if you have to go to the emergency room, that you tell them you're having a miscarriage. The numbers are probably much higher than that.
Yeah.
But at least that provided us with some level of documentation that yes, women are being seen in the emergency room at hospitals in Montana from complications from abortions.
So just to kind of lay some of the grounds for all of this, what are some of those complications that you tend to see?
The primary one that we noticed on those claims was excessive bleeding, but it can be incomplete abortions, it can be infections, sepsis, and now because of the Biden administration taking some of the reporting requirements off, none of that gets reported anymore. The only thing that gets reported is if there are deaths.
Wow.
So it could end up in a death.
Yeah. And then another thing I find interesting is you said that they are told to tell the healthcare professional that they're having a miscarriage. Does the treatment for that differ from having an abortion? Because to me, not being transparent with a doctor is usually not a good idea. You know, they're there to help you in that case. So to then lie about what complications you're having, does that change the type of care that those women need to receive?
Well, part of the problem is then that is recorded on their medical records as a miscarriage. So moving forward, any provider that they see from that point on is going to be treating them thinking that they, have a problem with potential miscarriages rather than
Right.
knowing it was an intentional abortion. So that's one of the factors is it messes up their medical records.
Yeah. And then how common is it for women to have complications from an abortion?
Well, there was ethics company, policy research company that did hold all payer insurance medical claims, and they found that 10.93% of women that have a chemical abortion have complications. So almost 11% of women that have a chemical abortion end up having some level of adverse event complication within 45 days of the actual abortion.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about some of the chemical abortions, because I know we're to a point where that is um, the most common way that these abortions are happening, and that a lot of times I'm under the impression that women can get chemical abortions without ever having to talk to a medical professional. Is that right?
Yes, that's accurate. That under the Biden administration, again, the requirements to actually see a doctor who prescribes the medication, that requirement was taken off, and part of that was motivated by COVID. Um, but so now they can get mail order um, the abortion pill through mail order means. But the problem with that is they don't know who the provider is
Right.
necessarily. Some of those pills are coming from India, out of country providers. And so the safety factor there, not knowing who the manufacturer is of the abortion pill, may or may not be a company in the United States. The other problem that's come up with that is she may not want an abortion, but her husband or her boyfriend or another family member may want her to have an abortion. So they
Yeah.
can order those pills and then, put them in a drink that she
Right.
has or whatever.
I actually remember I was, I think maybe about a year ago, maybe a little longer than that. I was at the Pray Vote Stand conference that was being held in Washington, D.C. And one of the speakers there was talking about how her husband at the time ordered abortion pills and actually poisoned her with it through putting it in her food and her drink. And she ended up having major complications and almost died because of it. And so, obviously, uh, no abortion is safe. It's a death-inducing drug. But to think that you can just go online and order these unregulated medications, it blows your mind.
And in Montana, right now, the national average is 65% of abortions are abortion pill or chemical abortions. But in Montana in 2024, which was the last year that we could get the records for, thus far from the Department of Public Health and Human Services, it was 84%. So we're much higher than the national average on
Interesting.
chemical abortions.
What do you think are some of the things that contribute to Montana having such a higher rate?
Number one is as soon as the Dobbs decision came out in 2022, Montana immediately became an abortion destination state. Because all the states around us, Wyoming, Idaho, North and South Dakota, all of those states had either had laws on the books that would eliminate or prevent abortions or severely restrict them. So at our Planned Parenthood, for instance, here in Helena, we often see cars from Wyoming, um, um, South Dakota occasionally, North Dakota frequently, Idaho.
Wow.
So
So it's people from other states coming in to have abortions here in Montana.
or contacting our abortion facilities to get them mailed, get a
Right.
prescription and get it
Yeah.
mailed because they don't have to have an in-person visit necessarily. Although, like I said, we do see out-of-state cars pretty regularly at our
Interesting.
facility here in Helena.
So, yeah, I find that really interesting. Just going back to the whole thing with the billboards, I've started to see them around town, which just makes me so happy every time I see one of Pro Life Montana's billboards. But what is some of the legal help that women experiencing complications can get? I know is it a phone number that you've got on the billboard that they can
So
call?
we have partnered with the two attorneys that started Abortion Injury. And so that website is on the billboards, abortioninjury.com, where women that believe that they have been harmed by an abortion can contact those attorneys. And then they'll be evaluated by those attorneys. We've partnered with them to see if they have like a legitimate case. The problem that we have in Montana right now, which hopefully the next legislative session will correct, is that we have a statute of limitations of 2 years of when they can file a potential lawsuit. And so hopefully we plan to have legislation in the next legislative session to extend that window. Obviously, a lot of women that have a chemical abortion are going to know almost immediately, if not immediately, if they've got a complication. But everything may go fine with their abortion at the time, and then years later they want to get pregnant and they find out they
Right.
have infertility issues. So they may not realize immediately that they have a complication from
Yeah.
an abortion.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Do you think that when these women are experiencing complications from their abortion, I know I've talked to a lot of people who have talked about having regret from abortions. Is that something that you tend to see mixed up in that as well?
Yeah, and that's part of what keeps them from seeking help for a while is the guilt and the shame
Yeah.
that comes, even if it was an abortion that didn't have complications. A lot of women feel a lot of guilt and shame around having an abortion, so they don't, they hold that in within themselves, and unfortunately don't get the help and healing necessarily that might be available to them.
Yeah, well, and I imagine that also affects them significantly when it comes to mental health and all of that too. I wonder, since you work a little bit in counseling, do you have any extra insight into that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have counseled women who have had abortions. And I know several women. A lot of the women that I know now are women close to my age who had their abortions like within the 70s and 80s, shortly after the Roe decision. And
Hmm.
just now, after all those years, are feeling comfortable admitting that they had an abortion clear back in the 70s or 80s.
Wow.
So, because of the shame, the guilt, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Um, so obviously here in Montana, we're kind of in a bit of a stuck between a rock and a hard place since abortion was, or the right to have an abortion was put into our Constitution. So I would love to hear from your perspective and from Pro Life Montana, what are some of the steps in the legislature? I mean, you mentioned the one of extending the amount of time that women have to file a legal claim, but what are some of the other things that you would like to see done from the legal or legislative side of things?
So one of the things that we're hoping to do is introduce some legislation that will require fetal development in health courses
Mhm.
in the public schools, well,
Yep.
all schools. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at. Literally just today from Patrick, who you just had on earlier, the Students for Life report came out at a conference in Washington, D.C. This week of the water tests that they did, showing the levels of mifepristone, which is the
Mhm.
abortion pill medication, in water supplies, in tap water and upstream and downstream of treatment plants.
Yeah.
So being able to get the legislature attention on the fact that these forever chemicals are actually in our water supplies, and have them, start looking at that as an issue that they need to address,
Right.
will be an important one. And so there is a Clean Water Act that's been written up, and it was almost introduced last legislative session, but at that time there wasn't enough information out there
Yeah.
about the potential of having forever chemicals in our water supply. Now there is. I just attended, what, a week or two ago, the environmental policy committee met, and DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, was there to give the results on their water tests that they did around the state in several Montana waterways. They were not testing, unfortunately, for pharmaceuticals and forever chemicals, but they tested for a lot of other things because there's so many of these PFAS chemicals.
Yeah.
I think they tested for like 44 or something like that when there's hundreds. So they didn't test, like I said, for pharmaceuticals. But now that we have this report and this information, hopefully that'll be something that the legislature will look at and start looking at maybe doing some studies between um, the next two legislative sessions, hopefully. That'll be
Yeah.
one of our goals.
Well, and another factor in all of that is in Montana, we have a clause in our state constitution that guarantees the right to a clean and healthful environment. And that little phrase has been used to justify all sorts of things. Mostly it's been leveraged by the left to push out some or certain Montana industries to say that they're not eco friendly. Um, so to be able to use that clause for something that I consider to be good and life saving, even, would be
Hmm.
huge. I have heard, though, that you guys have really struggled to find anyone willing to test for mifepristone. Because, I mean, if
It's
nobody
too much
is
of a
willing,
hot topic.
it is, yeah.
I believe they had to go, I don't know this for sure, but I've been told that Students for Life literally had to get a company out of the United States to do
Wow.
their testing because no company within the United States would do it. I know that Montana Family Foundation was trying to find a company that would do some testing in Montana, and they weren't able to find a company that would do that. Certainly, we don't have a company in Montana,
Right.
but they were looking nationwide too to try to find a company that would do some testing that they wanted to pay for.
It
But
blows my mind that not a single American company would be willing to test for mifepristone.
yeah, it's too hot a topic right now.
And
And I
it's
mean,
just
as a
crazy to me because even if you are, pro-choice, you would think that people would still be against death-inducing drugs in their water and things. I mean, I wouldn't want any sort of pharmaceuticals in my drinking water.
well, and as a mental health provider, like I told you years ago, I was hearing concerns about antidepressants,
Yeah,
anti-anxiety medications being in the water supply. So who knows what the effect of those is going to be either on
yeah.
people.
There's so much in that. So hopefully we can make some progress in that way since again, as we talked about, the majority of abortions happening now are those chemical abortions. Um, I would love to hear. I mean, obviously, you and I are on the same page with abortion, but just in general, what is the best argument against abortion that you have or that you wish everybody could hear?
Well, that it's not really healthcare
Yeah,
because healthcare is supposed to save lives, and
right?
there's always a death in an abortion. And so it's not really healthcare, and it's not and it's not necessarily good. I mean, some women may be able to have an abortion and not have complications, but I just told you, 10.93%, that is not the case.
And I imagine that with statistics like that, if you were to look into other sorts of medical procedures, obviously I wouldn't consider abortion to be a medical procedure, but like let's say if it was, a common surgery, with a failure rate like that or complication rate like that, what doctor would be willing to do that?
That's why we want to extend that window because we'll model this legislation after the one that the Montana Medical Freedom Alliance did last legislative session with regards to transgender treatments for minors. And just by extending that window in Montana, the three hospitals that were providing those services stopped providing them.
Wow.
So that's
Just by opening the door for them to have accountability. That's all.
exactly, exactly. Yep.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to add on or talk about before we end this live
Well,
stream?
we need help. We just launched the billboard campaign. So we have our first two billboards up, one in Billings and one in Helena, that provide the information for women that have been harmed by abortion, the legal avenues that they may have. But we would like to get those billboards in every one of the towns, major towns in
Yeah.
Montana that has an abortion facility.
Which would be
Um,
amazing because just the lack of transparency between abortion providers and the women receiving abortion is, there is not good transparency on what even is going on for them.
Yeah,
So,
we couldn't even get the legislation through that would have required an ultrasound. So maybe they get an ultrasound, maybe they don't.
wow. Well, with that, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much
Well,
for
thank you for
coming on the
having me.
podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Um,
Appreciate the
for all of you
opportunity.
watching, once again, this is a Red Quill Media podcast. You should definitely come and stop by, see us at the fair here. We're always willing and happy to talk to anyone who comes by. So if you have a question that you want to ask one of our candidates, we're more than happy to sit down on the podcast and answer any of your questions or talk about any issues you're passionate about. That is our goal. Is we want to represent you. My name's Katie Fruits. I'm a candidate for House District 80. So as somebody who hopes to be a representative, it's important that we have these sort of conversations to know how can we best represent you in the legislature, which is part of why I love talking to Sharon so much and hearing about some of the different ways that we can save lives going into this next legislative session.